Good evening, everyone. Oh my goodness, that's gone terribly. Sorry. So that's the problem with green screen issues. So good evening, everybody, and welcome to Forever Rugby on Forever Sports. It is a Wednesday night, and we're going to be talking about a couple of things tonight on our usual sort of our news show. On the agenda for the evening is to talk about the rule change that we're going to be seeing in the Rugby Championship. We're going to be talking about the Springbok squad for this weekend. We're going to be talking about Rassie Erasmus being charged and what his potential punishments could be for his video that went to World Rugby, and just going to be sort of talking about just sort of World Rugby in general, I think, a little bit, and kind of the sort of the situation we found ourselves in, because I think World Rugby have been sort of taken to task about a few things, and they kind of need to kind of sort of address it head on and stuff. We'll chat a little bit about the Currie Cup. I'm still in shock as to the fact that the Lions pretty much just decided not to become part of the Currie Cup Final Four and deciding to take a draw in the after getting a penalty with a minute and a half to go, with scrum dominance on the 5-meter line, deciding to take a draw. That's just got to be the dumbest decision I think I've ever seen on a rugby field. And we saw Herschel Youngster take a quick tap a week ago on the weekend. So so we can talk about that a little bit as well, and then we'll just get your thoughts on it. If there's anything you want to chat about, stuff like that, then start putting that in the comments, stuff like that, and we can talk about that throughout the rest of the evening. But before we do, as you can see on the screen, today's show is supported by Manscaped, who is the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels and have just launched their 4th-generation trimmer, the new Lawnmower 4.0. You can join over 2 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped. And with an exclusive offer to you, you can get 20% off as well as free shipping with the code FOREVER at manscaped.com. Go check out Manscaped. They've just launched in South Africa. You can check out the new Lawnmower 4.0. So what is the Lawnmower 4.0? So imagine shaving with a sleek, well-designed, and optimized trimmer that makes shaving time your favorite time in the bathroom. Manscaped has engineered the ultimate groin and body trimmer by focusing on intelligent functionality and incredibly comfortable grooming experience. Their 4th-generation trimmer, that's right, it's taken 3 generations to get to this point. Features a cutting edge so as to not cut you ceramic blade to reduce grooming accidents thanks to their advanced skin-safe technology. I now feel more confident than ever using my good old lawnmower. This upgraded trimmer includes a multi-function on and off switch that can engage a travel lock, so you don't have to have any awkward situations at the airport. It also gives the ability to turn on an LED light so you can see exactly what's going on down in the ditches. There's also wireless charging, which comes with a really cool little wireless adapter, and also has different guard lengths, so you can choose between sort of size 1 to 4, depending on the length that you want to get down there, so fully customized down there. At the end of the day, if you've been shaving your nuts with your face trimmer, you were doing it wrong. Get yourself a Lawnmower 4.0 at manscaped.com. You can get yourself 20% off as well as free shipping with the code FOREVER. So make sure you go and use it. They're supporting the channel, so it'll be really, really good for you to go support them. The more you support them, the more they support us, the more content we can do for you. So it's all a little bit of a circle that sort of goes round and round. So go and check out Manscaped. Got some very, very cool stuff. And anything you could possibly think of, well, Manscaped, they'll have you sorted. The code is FOREVER, and you can go and check that out. Right, so in terms of the plan ahead, so you've just seen the Currie Cup. We'll talk about that a little bit towards the end. But we'll start with Rassie Erasmus, who has been charged with breaching Regulation 18, which is misconduct. And I released a video about it today, and people are very much in support of Rassie Erasmus in terms of the fact that he went against World Rugby, and people are, really, really sort of saying that he's in the right to have got after them and make sure that, World Rugby need to be accountable and stuff like that. There have been some other reactions which are saying that, you can't criticize the ref in a public forum, and what makes rugby special is the fact that the referees have protection and that they're respected. So it's a bit of an interesting situation. So I'm interested to see what the comments have to say about this. My biggest issue is not with the fact that they have charged Rassie Erasmus. I don't think that's a major issue for me. I think that I'm enjoying the fact that they do, and depending on the sanction will sort of depend on, say, a lot about what I think about the entire situation. But I think that they've kind of missed the point, and unfortunately, World Rugby have been missing the point since there has been a point. Maybe they also need to get themselves a lawnmower with a bit of an LED light so they can actually see the damn point. Because the whole point of the video, the point of Warren Gatland talking about the referees, we also saw the referees come into the spotlights during the red card in the Australian series. And what they were saying is that they want to change the system at the moment in terms of how referees are viewed, in terms of when you get the feedback and how it all sort of works. So the point was not to come out by Rassie Erasmus and blast the referees. If you think that the entire point of that hour-long video was Rassie Erasmus telling these referees, those particular referees, they are not good enough, you've kind of missed the point. The point was not to attack those three referees. The point was to attack the system and to say to World Rugby that as coaches, we are not happy with how it is currently happening. Pretty much, that video would not have come out had the referees gotten back to Rassie Erasmus on the Sunday, a day later, so that they had the feedback sooner. They talk about the fact that he tried to call Nick Berry to discuss a few things, and Nick Berry was sleeping at 5 o'clock on a Sunday. And, some people saying that if he had just picked up, this would have never happened. So I think that is probably the point to focus on. So in terms of that, I think that, World Rugby will have to sanction him at some point, because you can't, if at the end of the day, if you don't punish Erasmus after he came out and said all those things and did that, it becomes a slippery slope, because the other coach can do it as well. So I think that you need to sort of probably draw a line in the sand. You probably do need to sanction him. If I'm World Rugby, I'm thinking I'll give him a monetary fine, something quite easy. You can then go and say the money's going to go towards some foundation or some program, and it can all be happy. But where I think that World Rugby have missed the point is that they had an opportunity. They're in the spotlight. All this has been brought to the top, and you've now got a chance to say, we hear you, we hear your frustrations. We do not condone the way you went about it. We cannot have coaches putting videos like that into the public forum. If you want to address it like that, you can do a video on it, and you can give us feedback, and you can send it to us, which was the original idea of the video. But you can't put it up in the public forum. That's fine. But World Rugby had a chance to then say, let's talk about this. Let's talk about the fact that both coaches are not happy. Let's talk about the fact that there wasn't a contingency plan to have a neutral TMO. Why wasn't there a contingency plan? How can we change this? How can we be better prepared? How can we, negotiate? How can we change the communication? Because apparently they knew from about a week or two in advance that they weren't going to be able to get a referee down to South Africa, but never informed the coaches. So how can we change that? The review process isn't working. Tuesdays, the coaches are saying that Tuesday is too late to get feedback. So how can we change this? Let's engage with the coaches. Let's sort of work towards an understanding. They had that chance to try and say, you know what? You went too far, so you will get punished, but we're willing to meet you halfway. We're willing to listen to what you have to say. We might not agree with it, but we'll listen to what you have to say. And let's see if we can work towards something which is amicable for you, for the coaches, for everyone, and we can work towards a better system. They didn't do that. Instead, the only thing that they said they were going to review was their own sort of rulings in terms of how they can punish the coaches. So instead of saying, we'll listen to your issues, we'll punish you, and then we'll listen to what you're going to say and move towards a situation where this doesn't happen, they said, we don't like it, we're going to charge you, we're probably going to fine you, we're going to sanction you for something, and then we're going to rewrite our rules to make sure it'll be easier to sanction you if you try and do it again. So it's not a good look for World Rugby, because it comes across as quite bureaucratic in terms of one way you may not challenge our authority, you may not ever come against us, we are not willing to come to the table, we are not willing to listen to you, what we say is law, and if you don't go along with it, we will make your life a living hell. And that's a very dangerous situation to be in. We're talking about an organization which has been under quite a lot of fire for a long time. Bill Beaumont has been in power for me for too long. I was really, really hoping that the Argentinian guy was gonna win and try and start reform World Rugby, because if we're being honest, they don't do enough for World Rugby. They really don't. we've got so many tier 2 nations who have the capacity to potentially become really decent sides. They don't get the chance to play nations. They don't get the funding. They don't get the sort of structures and the support they need from World Rugby to grow. Georgia could become a side that could play in the Six Nations. Fiji, Tonga, Samoa, those can become really good nations. We cannot have like 8 tier 1 nations or 10 tier 1 nations. Think about football. That's a ludicrous example. I mean, imagine football saying, listen, you guys have got 10 tier 1 teams. They'll play against each other and you must play a tier 2 team every now and again. It's ludicrous. It is absolutely ludicrous. You can name 10 teams from Europe who have all, been in World Cup finals and won World Cups and stuff like that. That doesn't include South America, where you've got some of the best players in the world. You've had some really special campaigns from Africa. We've had some really interesting campaigns from Asia in footballing terms. So from a rugby point of view, how can we only have 10 decent rugby nations? It's not enough. It's not good enough. We can't be going to the World Cup every single time knowing that the 8 teams in the quarterfinals will be, probably 5 teams from the Six Nations or 4 teams in the Six Nations, the 4 teams from the Rugby Championship, and maybe Japan will sneak in there if they're lucky. How can that be? How can that be our Rugby World Cup every single time, where basically the only time it's worth watching the Rugby World Cup is when it gets to quarterfinals and semifinals. After that, it doesn't really matter because it's just a bunch of teams playing against other nations that cannot ever begin to compete. There are no real sort of major upsets at the moment in the group stages, at least. We saw that Japan upset, and the fact that that's such a big thing is fantastic, and credit to Japan for beating the Springboks. But we need more of that. We can't just have that once every 3-4 World Cups. We need to have that every World Cup. We need to have New Zealand need to be able to be beaten by a Samoa, if they just decide to put in an absolutely sensational performance. But that will never happen in the current format. So that's the one thing. Now, you'll talk about the rule changes next. I just want to go to a couple of comments. It says, what's your predictions on the Springboks versus Argentina? Argentina looked shaky, especially the Romania game. Well, as Jacques Nienaber says, Argentina have only lost 1 game since the World Cup, and that was against New Zealand. They've also beaten New Zealand. They've beaten Australia. They've beaten Wales. They did beat Romania. So I think they're a side that's there for the taking if you pitch up and do the right things. But it's an incredibly passionate side, and I think if a couple of good things go their way, if they keep their discipline, that Argentinian side can be really, really good. When they played against New Zealand, it was the perfect performance. Their discipline was good. They made all the hits. They fronted up. They got every aspect of the game right. So they will have to try and do the same thing again this weekend, where they need to try and get everything right as well. But probably less to extent to this team if we were playing our A team. But the fact that we are playing a rotated side, I think it's going to be a close game. I think, and I wouldn't be surprised if Argentina were to win, because we have brought in a lot of changes. CRS Gaming says, shout out to the sponsor. Yeah, definitely. Southern Records World Rugby has lost the plot. Pubsy says, greetings from Wales. Gatlin Eddie Jones has been bumping their gums and criticism officials for many years. Yeah, it's not new. It's just been taken to the next level. And that's why I say I think it's been building and it's sort of been simmering. And now that the volcano has erupted in the Erasmus way, that's where we've suddenly come to a collision course. And that's why I still think we had a chance to try and, as usual, World Rugby are given this golden opportunity to try and do the right thing, and they don't do it. And we've seen this time and time again from them. We saw Romania, Georgia, Fiji, Uruguay, and the US doing some good things. They really need to play more games. We need like 50 or 20 teams to compete. 100%. I'll chuck that up there. We saw even Russia had quite a good, have had a couple of good games every now and again in World Cups and stuff like that. But, and you can see that these are nations who are itching. They want to take that next step. Uruguay want to be a competitive side in South America, but they just can't without the support of the other nations. And if that means that we need to, look at opening up our competitions and in the Rugby Championship, including a 5th team, and maybe making it a playoff system where we have a 5th team in the Rugby Championship, and you have to play to get into it. Or do you make it 6 teams in the Rugby Championship and you play every team once? I'm not opposed to that, to be honest. I'm not opposed to that. If it means that you only get to play in New Zealand once every 2 years at home, so be it. So be it. If it really has to be the case, if that's what has to happen for these other sides to get better, then let's make those sacrifices. A lot of people will disagree with me, but I'm happy to, for the next couple of years, to sacrifice not playing New Zealand twice a year, playing Fiji, playing a Uruguay or something, if it means that they can grow and they can be competitive. Because I'm just bored. I mean, don't we get bored of every year knowing exactly who you're going to play? You're going to play a European side in 3 tests during the mid-year, and then you'll go at the end of the year and play the other three of the other European sides at the end of the year. And apart from that, you'll play Australia, Argentina, and New Zealand every year. Isn't it a bit competitive? I think obviously the New Zealand game is always the big one, but how excited do we get about playing the Wallabies twice every year? How excited do we get about playing Argentina twice every year? You know, in many ways, I prefer the tours. You know, when Ireland come down for 3 matches, I almost prefer that to a certain degree than the Rugby Championship. Because I think it's something a bit different. You know, 3 tests against Ireland or 3 tests against France. We're going to get 3 tests against Wales next year. So, you know, we need to try and start thinking out the box here. And I would like to see these teams coming into the fray. Sack Beaumont and bring in Pichot. Yeah, I agree. Rassie's case has nothing in it. It was not leaked by him, by the match officials that received the video. He'll be fine. Well, that's the thing. They have to prove that he was the one that leaked it, or that the leak came from SA Rugby itself. If you can't prove that, then you're kind of dead in the water. Israel says Bula from Fiji and Japan for Rugby Championship. Heracles says, I'd rather have a place for our SA 18 to play against these tier nations. Can't not play the All Blacks. Great to play the best. No, I'm not saying remove the All Blacks, but maybe not having a home and away game. Play 1 game a year. Have a Rugby Championship final. Play every team once and then a final. Obviously, we can't do that during COVID. What about that? You still play 6 games, so your schedule doesn't change at all. So maybe that's a good idea, you know. And in theory, if South Africa and New Zealand are the best teams, then they'll be in that final, and then they can play twice a year. But you know, I just think it's so stagnant at the moment as the Rugby Championship. And I think I enjoy the 6 Nations. I really do enjoy the 6 Nations. But I think that you need to start bringing in a promotion relegation system. And if Georgia can beat Italy, then bring in Georgia. You know, they talk about Japan, but Japan's such a big, you know, that's a pretty big thing to try and bring them in. And we also and if you're not going to do that, then you need to have more tier 2 tournaments. And as you're talking about the fact that the SAA team, you know, let's do that. Let's have the Maori All Blacks playing against these tier 2 nations often. Let's have the SAA. But, you know, even that is not going to do as much as playing against the Springboks, playing against the All Blacks, playing against the Wallabies, playing against the Argentines every single year. We've got to try and get these teams more game time. What do you think of inclusion of Fiji, Drua, and Moana Pacifica in Super Rugby? Yeah, I think that's a good move, but that's a move that should have happened years ago. How can this only be a thing now? You know, that only now we're going to have other sort of teams from the sort of Pacific Islands coming into Super Rugby. It's so late to the party as always. How are we not looking at, you know, sort of Curry Cup idea? I mean, not Curry Cup, but like almost like a Champions League in football where you can sort of say, right, these sides can play, and then we're going to sort of combine and have these sides playing, because even exactly, and that's a good point in terms of the domestic scene. You can't have all these Fiji teams playing against each other, putting together an international team, and then going and playing against the All Blacks, who have got 4 New Zealand teams playing against 4 Australian teams. We're playing against 4 South African teams. You know, the reason that Georgia has become so good recently and are on the rise because so many of their players are playing in the French league, but a lot of them are playing in the second league. So they're not playing tier 1 rugby, but that's the whole point. That you know, to be really good, you have if you have to go over there and play in their leagues. Whereas if you can sort of find a way to bring Georgian sides into the Heineken Cup or into the, you know, the Challenge Cup and stuff like that, that would do a lot for them as well. So probably says Southern Hemisphere 6 nations could do that. It would be great to add Fiji and Japan to the Rugby Championship and add a relegation for the one that finishes last. I agree. Before we can do that, we need to get our international season in Canada sorted. Well, that's what I think. I think we've been waiting for this reshuffle for a while. And I quite like the whole idea of that World Rugby League, to be honest. That whole thing where the 6 nations, the Rugby Championship was all going to contribute towards the combined log. And then you're going to play these teams. I quite liked the idea and concept. I know all the coaches threw it out because they said it was too much rugby, but I quite liked it. There is evidence that is 100% solid to back the fact that Rassie did not leak it. Trust me. Well, to be fair, you don't even have to prove that he didn't leak it. I feel like World Rugby, you have to prove that he did. Because if he says he doesn't, then you're kind of dead in the water. I don't think he'll get punished too harshly. I'll be interested to see what they do. Apparently, SA Rugby might punish them themselves and say, "Don't worry, we'll handle it. 10,000 rand, cool." Aiden says, "I agree. I'd love to see more second-tier teams, but more competitive and broaden their horizon." Rackler's actually back there with the final. Work Shooting Wrestling says, "Interesting how the only time an international team can play in a final is in the World Cup. Having a Six Nations and TRC final could improve players' composure." It's a very good point. Should have been these two teams instead of the Sunwolves and Southern Kings way back in 2016. Another good point there. Stephen Anderson saying, "Playing New Zealand twice a year is what makes us New Zealand as the powerhouse that we are. But I agree, let's share the experience with lower tiers to help grow the game." Well, I think we've kind of got our problem and solution in the same sort of sentence, isn't it? From a selfish point of view, 100%. If we want to continue being the best we are, we need to play. We want to play Australia twice. We want to play New Zealand twice. We want to play Argentina twice. We want to play 3 tests against Ireland or France or Wales or England. We want to play outgoing tours against the same nations. We don't want to be playing 4 out of our 12 tests a year against Fiji and Samoa and USA. From a completely selfish South African point of view, in terms of what's the best for us and how we get ourselves the best. But if we're going to put the cards on the table and from a completely neutral perspective and say, right, how can we get these teams to be competitive? You have to sacrifice games. You can't have, that's it. We play, 4 games, 6 games in the Rugby Championship, 3 games so we play 12 tests of the year, basically. And maybe a 13th game against the Barbarians. So we're playing 12 tests a year, of which 2 come against New Zealand, 2 come against Australia, 2 come against Argentina. That's half your tests against the 3 opposition. The other 3 comes as an incoming tour against 1 European side. The other 3 go to 3 of the European sides you probably didn't play. So if Ireland come down, you probably go overseas and play England, Wales, and Scotland, or England, Scotland, and France, or whatever. It's very rare that we'll go and play Fiji, or we'll go and play Samoa. And, the nice thing about Lions Tour years is that we did see that. We saw Canada playing. We saw USA playing. But we need to see Japan playing these teams more. We need to see a lot more of these sort of things happening. So I would like to see us playing against these teams more and not just be a World Cup thing. And as somebody said, maybe we should start introducing finals or playoffs or something like that so that people do play a playoff rugby as opposed to, you play an international playoff once every 4 years. Or every 4 years, you have a chance to play playoff rugby at an international level. And even then, it's only 3 games. So you will never play more than 1 game a year in terms of games per year internationally for your entire career. Opinion on rugby, Europe Super Cup. Will be good to see if Cheetahs and Kings in it. Yeah, so I'm interested to see what goes, and that's what we're talking about. I think if we can have a Cheetahs and a Kings. Look, I think the Kings are a bit of a disaster. So maybe the Cheetahs and Creekers at the moment, or the Pumas, or something. Into sort of Europe Super Cup, and let's bring teams from Russia, Spain, Georgia, and then let's also find a way to have that playing into the bigger leagues and getting them into the Challenge Cup, getting them into the Heineken Cup. We can't just continue having this rugby elite and then wondering why the game's not growing. And if we want the game to grow and we want, we want more players, I would like to see it become a bit more of a global game where maybe we've got players going to USA, but also maybe we've got more players coming to South Africa. I think that's something that we might need to look at. At the moment, all we're doing is seeing our players going overseas. But when was the last time we saw a player come overseas to South Africa? And we've seen some. Remember Todd Clever at the Lions years ago, the American, very, very good player. But it'll be quite cool to sort of almost see sort of more of that. I'm not saying that we need to import players, but let's find ways to get these players into our local leagues and into the top tier rugby, and because it can only improve rugby. I guess at the end of the day, I'm bored of going to the World Cup where you have 1 hard group game, 2 walkovers, and then we start watching from the quarterfinals. I want to go to the World Cup and not be a 80-point exhibition against Namibia and not see the All Blacks running 100 points against the USA. It's boring. It's cuck. Nobody wants to see that. That's your showpiece event, and it's that easy. So we've got to find ways to change it. And that's what I'm talking about with this World Rugby lost the plot. Because, obviously we're having these conversations. But then obviously we've got rule changes for this weekend. Now, if you haven't seen them, there's a couple of rule changes this weekend, and a couple of people haven't agreed with what I said about them, which is fine. You can all allowed to have your own opinion. I might not agree with what you have to say. But the first is the 50-20-2. And as Mike Hammer says, please do smash a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. Also go check out Manscaped. Shout out to Manscaped. So we'll start with the 50-20-20. I keep saying this 50-22 rule. Basically, the 50-22 rule is that if you kick from your own half, so if players in your own half and you kick in behind the defense and it goes out indirectly into touch inside the 22, you will have the put in from the line out. So, for example, if you're kicking from your 22, you can land the ball inside the field of play and it rolls out inside the 22. You will have the put in for the line out. So the idea and the concept of this is that it forces teams to drop players back, so that you have to have pretty much a player guarding the touchline, so that you can't do that. By not doing that, or by doing that rather, that then opens up gaps, because obviously you've got 30 men to defend as opposed to 40 and a fullback. So that one player will you create overlaps. So the idea, I think, is to try and create more gaps in defense, but also to sort of encourage probably more tactical kicking as opposed to aimless kicking in many ways, or aimless kicking in terms of kick chase and stuff like that, to try and find touch and get territory and get yourself in there, take a line out. I don't know if I like it. In fact, I don't think I do like it. I think it's becoming quite rugby leaguish, and I think it gets quite complicated. At the moment, the only sort of rule like that is, don't kick it out in the full unless you've got set 22, but that's about it. So, we've had an entire series where everybody's moaned about the kicking, and now you've brought in a rule which encourages not the same kicking. I'm not going to say it's exactly the same, but it does encourage you to try and find the space to kick in behind. In theory, it also can encourage you to keep the ball in hand because there might be gaps in the defense. But I don't like it. I think, as I say, I think it does become a bit rugby leaguish, and a bit sort of almost, I'm not quite footballish, but it's like, it's just a weird, it's a weird concept for me, for you to kick the ball out and to get a line out from it, and it's not a penalty. It's just a strange environment for me, and strange decision. Before we move on with the rule, let's go to some of the comments here. EPL has been struggling so too early for now. Yeah, they need to sort out their administration. More guys like Hugh Jones, exactly. Rugby Championship needs to have pools and a knockout stage. You can still maintain 6 games that way with more teams involved. Do you think the new rules will affect the Springboks like the 50-22 kicking one, which would compromise the defense system? 50-22 is why France Spain is playing. That's exactly why the last World Cup was so much more exciting, with Japan being a competitive team and not just a walkover team at 100%. Aiden said, I don't know, when I watched the video earlier, I felt as if World Rugby was making rules/laws to hinder the way the Bokke play. Well, that's the thing, because there's all this talk about the fact that because the Springboks operate with a rush defense, they don't have those players back. So they use their wings a lot on the defense, and they have really sort of in and around this. So and Faf de Klerk is very good at sort of either jumping up the line and doesn't necessarily mop up behind. So a lot of people are quite upset about the fact that it has sort of been brought in to sort of counteract that, and we'll sort of see how it really affects us this weekend, and depending on how well Nicolas Sanchez can sort of exploit it. I just don't like it. I don't enjoy the fact that you can, as I said, that you can kick in your own half and get yourself on the 22. I mean, you can have a counterattack, for example, turn the ball over, there's nobody back, and you can just smash it on the ground, and it rolls out the 22. And instead of you putting them under pressure, they've got a defensive line, you've suddenly earned yourself a line that you can maul that up and score a try. I mean, is that exciting? Is that exciting rugby to watch? I like the fact that you can have this really good counter-attacking kick, which puts them under pressure. They then are forced into a clearance, which isn't great, which then allows you the line out. It's kind of like them cutting up the middleman. So instead of you playing a territory game where you kick in behind and pin them back, and then they have the line out, and then they kick out and touch from inside 22, and then you've got a line out on, like, let's say the 10 or just by the 22. They're trying to cut out the middleman now, where if you can kick it in behind, you can earn yourself the line out. And I just don't like that song. I mean, that idea. So I don't know what are your thoughts on it? It's 'cause I'm not sure if it's maybe me just talking about it, out of my backside. I'm just having a really, really hard time wrapping my head around the fact and trying to get behind it. Where it says, to be fair, in the first Best World Cup game, there was no 50-22 kicks, and even in the NRL, it doesn't happen too often. Look, I mean, it's quite new, so maybe it will take a while for it to happen, and it'll probably be one of those things which takes a while before people learn how to use it correctly. But the next rule is the goal line drop. Now, this is quite interesting. Again, I'm almost sort of feeling that these days we're kind of creating rules for the sake of it. I think there are a couple of rules I definitely agree with, particularly sort of the player welfare rules. But the next one is the goal line dropout. So if the ball is held up in goal, okay, so if you get held up in goal, if there's a knock-on from an attacking player inside, so in the goal area, or an attacking kick is grounded by the defenders in their own goal. So if you kick too far and they ground it, you will not have a 22 dropout. You will have a goal line dropout. Now, that I quite enjoy. The fact that it almost encourages you, you can't just sort of go back and wait for them to carry you and dot down. Even if it's kicked, if it stays in play, you're either playing it or you're going to have a 22 or you're going to have a goal line dropout. And a goal line dropout means you take it on your try line. All your players behind the try line and you are dropping it on the try line as opposed to the 22. It also rewards, I suppose, holding and being held up. If you can hold up, you can sort of turn over the ball. And if it's a knock-on, then you sort of, it's almost like it guarantees you possession, but it's still sort of 50-50. And the thing is that you cannot, it's very difficult to get the ball back from a goal line drop, because it's not like you just chip it ahead and hope somebody can catch it. Because if you get that wrong, somebody's catching it and just placing it over the try line. With 22, you can kind of get it wrong, and they still have to go 22 meters to try and score a try. So I'm not adverse to the goal line dropout. I think that's one of the better innovations that we've seen. And then there's a couple of ones that I think the flying wedge is a good rule. So basically, a flying wedge is when you pass the ball to someone who's then got somebody on this flank and somebody on that flank, and they're holding on to you, and you create a little bit of a scrum almost and push that power through. They're saying that you can't do that, and I like it because I think it's just unrealistic to stop. With them clamping down on the fact that you have to make sure you wrap, and they're clamping down on how high you can hit and how important it is for you to use your arms. It's making tackling a much more precise art. And if you're going to make tackling much harder, you've got to level the playing field. You can't then say to the defender, listen, if you go low, you got to make sure you wrap. You can't do a grass cutter. You can't do this. You can't do that, which I agree with, by the way. I think they're all on the right track. But you can't say that and then say, but he can have two players behind him running in over you. It's just not fair. So there is now a one-man latch. So to quote the rules, to recognize the potential for one player pre-latching prior to contact, but this player must observe all of the requirements of the first arriving player, particularly needs to stay on their feet. So you can still have one person behind you, but they have to stay on their feet, and they have to, it's basically like being the first person at the ruck. So they can latch onto you and still sort of go over, but they can't sort of seal it off or go down with you. They have to be at their feet at the breakdown, which again, I agree with, because you can't seal the ball off, and it makes it a bit more competitive. Carly says, don't worry, I feel the only rule affecting the Springboks is the latcher are only being brought down to do one instead of two, as we just talked about now. I'd say the 50-22 rule would encourage kicking rather than creating running rugby. The goal line drop is very interesting. I agree. Craig says, she sees rules, man, creates such a stop-start play and becomes not interesting to watch. TDX Gaming says, I'm interested to see how the Springboks defend this weekend. Box will hammer Argentina. Springboks will defend the same way. I don't think we'll make any adjustments yet. I kind of think we'll kind of sort of keep going with it until it gets found out in a major way. I think we've got such an important defensive system that's currently working that if you start tweaking with it, you risk sort of losing your structure. Marina von X says, I think World Rugby needs renewal, very urgent. I think Mr. Bilderman must step down or a younger person must take over. We tried that. You got Schnei by Rugby Africa. This is why nobody likes Africa, because he was going to win, and then Rugby Africa went with Bloody Bill. Useless bunch. I think no rugby official must serve older than 60. Yeah, I mean, not to be that, I don't want to be ageist, but you do kind of think made move on a little bit. Contender says, I wish we would see South Africa versus Uruguay, or even USA versus Samoa for a June test series, but thanks to Beaumont and Co, it won't happen. Stephen Anderson says, it doesn't mean that when we add tier 2 teams that automatically improve, it'll need grassroots change as well. Look at Italy versus Japan, 2 different stories. Oh, no, 100%. But the having those games result in revenue and interest. So when you play against the Springboks, it's a bit like from like a broadcasting rights point of view, for example, playing against India is your most lucrative series. I think it was something like when South Africa plays against India, they generate like 300 million rand in TV rights. That's how commercially important a tour like that is. So if South Africa goes, for example, to Fiji and plays a 3-test series in Fiji, or even if Fiji come here, they get a lot of financial injection. So it's not going to be a case of, right, we'll change it up and we'll see in 2 years. If they can't beat us by 2 years, we'll kick them out. You will have to persist for quite a long time. But you've got to be, you've got to take the plunge here. And you should have taken the plunge 20 years ago so we wouldn't be having this conversation. But you've got to take the plunge at some point and sacrifice it. Mike Cameron says Bill was playing rugby in 73, should be in an old age home, 100%. I mean, he was playing rugby. I think he was playing rugby 23 years before I was born. And he is still making the decisions on it. And I've grown up, seen it, played it, retired. Wouldn't say I really had a career. But yeah. Aiden said, I thought the flying wedge was already illegal, and at least that's what I was taught in high school. I feel like this new wedge rule is kind of aimed at Bocca's special move from the World Cup final. Yeah, so I don't think that you could still create a maul, but you can't have 2 players pre-lashed before contact. So what you can do is, as you're taking contact, you can still have players around you. It's about pre-latching. But as soon as you hit the contact, then players can latch onto you and create a maul. So you can still, in theory, do that. You just can't have Franco Mostert flying through with Dwayne Vermeulen on one shoulder and, P-Step Toy on the other shoulder, and now you, one player, must try and stop those 3. That's kind of the thinking there. After France got awarded the 2023 World Cup, I'm not a fan of the council and it's biased. People, the content I was going to bring to you if South Africa got the World Cup. We would have been in the stadiums, we would have been in the press conferences, we would have taken you on a tour of South Africa if we had gotten it. Now I'm going to have to try and raise like 100 grand to go over to France. So if anyone's got 100 grand, I mean, I'm ready, but it's not really feasible, is it? France are a good rugby team. No, I don't think anybody sort of argued with the team. It's the fact that they had the 2007 World Cup and now they're getting the 2023 World Cup. So there were, 3 World Cups in between? 2011, 2015, 2019, we're back in France. We've got 10 tier 1 nations, and yet we're going back to the same nation after 4 World Cups. Just a bit cuck. Whereas 95, 2023, that's almost 30 years, between. So you can go with that. Contender says we can also do a South African test series with games in Zimbabwe at the National Sports Stadium for 2 games and maybe 1 in Windhoek. Well, yeah, or even an SAA test games, but like Zimbabwe, for example, that's a side. Not even tier 2 nations, but tier 3 nations. Got to get the Sables playing. Got to get Kenya 15s playing. We've got to get rugby playing in these and other African countries. South Africa should not be such a big exception to be good at rugby. Namibia can sort of get away with it, but Zim produced some good rugby players. Beeson Tawera, the best prop of all time for South Africa, is a Zimbabwean rugby player. So they've got some of those players. Look, they've got their own issues there, but let's see more of those sort of nations playing. I want to see a Chilean rugby team. I want to see a Mexican rugby team. Like the Netherlands. Those people are giants. They are giants. Why are we not seeing a decent Netherlands side? Struan Dixon says, after the success of Japan, we should be looking at USA, Canada, 100%. As your channel goes, you should set up a PayPal and we can all crowdfund you for a France tour. It's a hell of an idea. Maybe. Look, we'll look at France 2023. I've actually genuinely been looking at packages and stuff like that and what it would cost for us to try and go over. It's just a lot of money. I'd love to go to France 2023. I'd love to. I think we could have so much fun with doing it. But it would be a very big ask from you people. Ruan van Dijk says, I got intel from Willie Leroux. My cousin, he told me that Rassie is about to resign. He doesn't want to hurt SA Arabia as a corporation. Very sad. Well, if it's true, then that would be sad. But look, we'll wait. I'll be very surprised if he does resign. as SA Rugby, I mean, why would you let him resign? You would sit there saying, listen, we'll take the heat. We'll take the heat. He's just done too many good things. So it'd be a massive loss if he did resign. So I'd be very surprised if they let him resign. Escovedo says, Mexican rugby, I like that, a Mexican MLR team. Yeah, get them in, I mean, look at the Caribbean. Look at the West Indies cricket team. They are flipping huge. You're telling me we can't find some rugby players in there. You're telling me that Chris Gale wouldn't be able to sort of pack down in the front row as a flank. I mean, you look at Jason Holder. You reckon that wouldn't be a good second rower? You grow the game. All the tier 1 nations. Dorian says nothing wrong with the French team. Independent evaluation recommended SA, but the World Rugby Council dominated by northern teams decided to select France. Precisely. All tier 1 nations should feel that B teams play the tier 2 nations. Maybe an OnlyFans to raise some money. So you're telling me I need to put this into work and then go start an OnlyFans? Listen, I don't think so. I like your suggestions. I'm always open to suggestions. I think that might be probably pushing the limits a little bit. Dutch rugby is on the up. The Visser brothers probably being the most famous. Yeah, but it's just and it's good to see. But let's hear about it. Let's be honest. I can't name. You name the Visser brothers, but you can't exactly name a lot of Dutch rugby players. And yet they're really big people. So, and the Sevens has been a really good outlet in terms of being able to produce these players. I mean, Fiji and USA, phenomenal on the Seven circuit and non-events in the 50s. Let's get that going. Rassie is silent. Sorry, mark my words. The greatest trick Rassie has ever pulled is convincing the world that the Springboks only play one way. Watch Squidgers break down the two different styles we play. Rassie is silently building his plan B. Yeah, that whole plan B was Alton Yankees, wasn't it? Basically, the whole sort of that different sort of section we had against Wellington, and being able to switch the kicking game to a bit of a running game. So I'm interested to sort of see what we'll see. South American World Cup with games in Montevideo, Buenos Aires, and other venues like Salta. Mike Hammer says, I have faith in Rassie. I'm sure he won't capitulate. Aiden says, what's your take on Major League Rugby in the States, especially since World Rugby is trying desperately to break into that North American fans? I want to actually start watching more Major League Rugby. Apparently the final was a cracker. I think it was the final. So I can't really comment on it because I haven't watched it, but I mean, it's good to see a lot more players going over there. It's a bit like the MLS, Major League Soccer, in terms of the type of players going, with all the players sort of coming to the end of their careers going over. But I'll tell you what, you break into the US market, there's money there, there's facilities there, so it would be massive to try and do it. And if you can do it in America, and try and infiltrate more Europe, then that's what you sort of need, because we need the cash. At the end of the day, you've got to get the cash. And I think the fact that Major League Rugby is on the up, and the fact that Rock Nation is now involved in the Sharks, the fact that American US corporate consortium now owns the Sharks, talks about the fact that there is a shift in North America, and it's long past due that we need to get it. Because at the end of the day, the States need to start mucking around with sports that only they're good at. Nobody plays baseball. I know it's big in Asia, but nobody plays basketball. It's big in Spain and a bit in Africa and stuff like that. It's building in Africa, but worldwide, not really. And nobody freaking plays football. Literally nobody plays freaking football. Stop mucking around. Align yourself with the rest of the bloody world, and let's graft. Northern versus Southern Hemisphere test series once every 4 years. Cap the amount of players from each nation so the tier 2s get some players playing with top tier. The logistics of that, I think, would probably make it too difficult. It's a nice concept. It's almost like we had, when you had World 15s and stuff like that. It would be a really cool concept. But I just think logistically it would be a nightmare. 2DRX Gaming says Sevens is doing a better job to spread rugby than 15s, 100%. But they're doing it. What has Sevens done? They've made rugby fun. They made it a party. They made it a good time. They made it, look, not that I want to sort of advocate drinking stuff like that, but the whole thing about Sevens is a weekend party. You go there, you have drinks with your mates, you go and watch exciting rugby and stuff like that. So, you got to make 15s like that. And I'm not saying that means we need to have exciting rugby, but build some hype, build some cool brands. I think the URC, for me, looks like it's going to be such a cool brand. And look, and this is somebody who's done a lot of digital media in my academic career, so I get excited by that. But you watch the graphics that the URC are putting up. You watch the videos. They released a video explaining what the URC is in every single language. They had an Afrikaans one. They had a Welsh one. They had a French one. An Italian one. They had a Xhosa video as well, explaining exactly what the URC is. And how cool is that? And they're building a really cool brand. They've got Rock Nation involved. So something like that, which can make rugby fun, it can make it young and accessible. That's what we need to do. The West Indies cricket team would double as a rugby one. Chris Gale is coming into his prime. Cornwall is prop material. Don't disrespect Cornwall. Cornwall could be in the outside centre. You hit that gaps. But this is what I'm saying. Look at the size of that West Indies cricket team. Look at the size of, like Karen Pollard. You tell me that Pollard would not be a good rugby player. Let's go and get the rugby players in the West Indies. Plan C should be Jan Goosen. He's proven to be a good backup once more. He stayed retires from South Africa. I think our next three flower halves of the World Cup will be Yankees, Pollard, and Goosen. And what more could you want from those three, really? I think it's a very nice. I think those three will be the flower halves. I think that by the time we get there, I think Alton will probably be there more as a sort of experienced head, bit like sort of a Skulk Brits role. Although not that he'd be old, I think he'd be 33, which is not that old. But I think those three, I don't see any other flower from this country pushing in the next sort of 18 months enough to get into that sort of conversation. Maybe Jordan Henderson if he really comes to the party. Cade Volata was an exciting prospect, but he's incredibly young and is now injured. Curran Bosch, we don't even know if flower is his main position. So I reckon it'll be Goosen will take Morné Steyn spot in the squad now, and those three will be the flower halves going forward. And I'll be very happy to see those as the three flower halves going forward. I've always said I'd like to see Goosen in the box squad. I've just said he needs to play enough rugby to get into it. So I would put Goosen at the end of the year tour, and then we're fine. We can move. But play some rugby at Currie Cup, keep impressing, keep earning his stripes, keep staying fit. I think that's the main thing. But those three will be our three flower halves, and they're very nice options. They all offer something a little bit different. Mark Julie says, Kurnow is the best. John A. Smith, opinion on the chosen squad for the Rugby Championship. Who would you change, if any? Chuffed Weber is starting. What about the Tier 2 nations playing their national teams in the major club championships in their regions? Also not a bad idea. The problem here in the UK, in particular Scotland and England, is the people that run our unions are pompous asses. Well, that's the thing. You've also, without being that guy, rugby's always been quite, and football's a bit the same, but there's almost like this snobby attitude of, rugby's played by, we don't play with, there's football yobs, and we are the sort of upper class, very proper, very respectful, very thing sport, which is great in theory. I'm all for, having the right values and stuff like that. It's a numbers game, though. It's a numbers game. And if you can't market rugby to your everyday person on the street, you are dead in the water. You are dead in the water. And it goes to all sports, because I'm just a sports lover. I've been saying it for years. You've got to make sure that cricket is accessible to everyone. So if you can't do that, it's never going to grow. You're going to make it accessible to absolutely everybody in the street. Everybody in the street must be able to look at rugby and think, I can watch it for that reason, or for this reason, or I want to play it for this reason. And I think, unfortunately, they're about 25 years behind. The reason that football has grown such a good brand is look at what they do. Lionel Messi was unveiled today as a PSG player. 230,000 people watching live on YouTube. 230,000 people were watching a YouTube video of Messi being unveiled. That is what football has done. His shirt sales sold out in 30 minutes. That is what football has done. We're talking about transfers going for £200 million. That is what football has done. Now, I'm not saying nobody can ever compete at that sort of level, but look what football has done. Look where they've done. And there's still a lot of issues in football, but look at how they've marketed and make it so marketable. Rugby needs to be sitting there writing notes and putting that out. Taylor says, why does Fozzie and Hansen not enjoy La Mape? And they should also choose overseas-based players playing in France and England. Super Rugby franchises do not have everything. It's a very, very interesting concept, because we had a similar selection policy, and then we had the 30-test policy in terms of choosing overseas players. I think they're going to run into an issue. They're going to have to be a bit like us, where they'll have to sort of go back on it. And I think they'll have to start bringing picking overseas players. Because I think that more and more players will go, unless you can match those wages and stuff like that. Why wouldn't you go? So I think they're on a collision course on New Zealand rugby. Mike Evans says, capture some of the UK market, great exchange rate. Aiden says, I like Alton as a player, very solid, level-headed and tactical. I really understand why he gets so much slack. we can talk about that for a long time. Unfortunately, a lot of it has to do with his hair, a lot of it's got to do with his skin color, a lot of it's got to do with his playing style. But he is the ultimate professional. Every coach loves him, and he's got a massive part in the squad. So I'm not going to talk about him because then I just get told that I'm biased and know nothing. Why is Marcel Coetzee being ignored? Again, I think it's game time. So I think that he'll probably be around at the end of the year. I think he got injured at the wrong time for the Bulls. I think if he had come in and played the entire Rainbow Cup series, he probably would have been involved. So I imagine it's game time. Look, it's also difficult when you don't pick a player because he hasn't been playing enough game time. They brought Dwayne Vermeulen back in, so it's difficult to drop somebody you haven't given a chance and bring somebody else in. So, for example, if you dropped Alton Yankees now out of the squad and brought up Johan Goosen, Alton Yankees got 10 minutes for the Springboks at Test match rugby this season. He came on against Georgia. So, how can that be fair? If you dropped Dan du Preez and called up Marcel Coetzee, he didn't play a single minute for the Springboks. Is that fair? So I think that they've got a very frank and open selection policies where they want to make sure they're always making the right decision. So I think that Marcel Coetzee and Johan Goosen will be in the Springboks squad come the end of the year, if they keep playing like they are. But I think that, Coetzee hadn't played enough rugby. They pretty much said he was on the radar, but he hadn't played enough rugby. And then he got injured and had COVID issues when Dwayne was ruled out, and they didn't call up a replacement. So I think if he was fit and firing for a couple of weeks before that, and if he was in good condition, I think he probably would have made the squad. But now, because he wasn't, he now has to work that a little bit harder and try and get into the squad. Mike says sevens is huge when you consider how many countries are involved now. Exactly. Can't wait to go to the Cape Town Sevens at the end of the year. My brother went to the Dubai one and said it was phenomenal, so I'm really keen to go. I've never actually been to the Sevens. Missed the ones down in the Eastern Cape, and then now it's moved to Cape Town. So I was supposed to go last year, but it was cancelled. So I'm very keen to try and go this year. Goosen and Rassie must go back to the days of Nakadrotsky at Cheetahs, so I think that should help him back and the box here up good form. I think as I said, it's not a matter of if. I think it will be a matter of when. I think Mornestein will carry us through the Rugby Championship. I don't think he'll play much, and I think that'll be it. They'll say so long, thanks to the 2 Lions series. Enjoy your retirement, and they'll bring Goosen for the end of year tour. Tennis, NFL, not fun to like. For goodness sake, USA should invest in rugby, soccer, football, instead of this NFL stuff for hooligans. Yeah. But I mean, that's the thing. You look at like the college games at the NFL, and they've got like 100,000 people watching a college football game. And you're thinking, surely, chaps, surely. Imagine 100,000 people watching the Springboks versus the USA. Think of the money that would generate for us. Goosen is talented. He's very talented. He's also very injury prone. So as I said, I can understand why he wasn't picked. He's playing well at the moment, but as I said, before he played that game against the Bulls SA, he had played 370 minutes the entire season. Alton Yankees had gone over to France for 4 matches and played, I think, like 30 minutes less. To put in perspective how many minutes Goosen could have played. I think he played 370 of a possible like 2,500 minutes. So he's playing like 15 or 20% of the amount of minutes he could have played. So that's why he wasn't picked. And when he did play, he played outside center. So I can understand not picking him now, but he will be in the India squad as far as I'm concerned, and I'm fine with that. Spain are involved in the autumn test this year. Who knew? Well, that's very good news. I also didn't know that, to be honest. We're going to start wrapping up soon into the last sort of 6 minutes. NFL has gone too political, which is why I stopped watching it. Rugby, like MLR, has shown so much passion. It's my new favorite competition in the US. Yeah, and we need more of that, don't we? We need more. And I think that it's USA. What I tell you, what I will say something is that USA are so good in the digital sphere. NFL, ML, Major League Baseball, the hockey league, stuff like that. What they produce from a digital media point of view is some phenomenal stuff. They've been doing stuff. I mean, they've got stuff like this. A channel like mine, they've literally got that for their official leagues. Like literally on the MLS channel, they can have somebody like me just talking as a fan and having these sort of conversations. We don't have any of that. Rugby doesn't really have any of that. I think one of the reasons the channel has grown so quickly is, first of all, thanks to you people, but also there's not a lot of people doing this. And it's weird. Why aren't a lot of people doing this? I can go and find you 100 Manchester United fan accounts like this, and yet I can't find you more than 15 rugby accounts. That's not 15 Leinster accounts or 15 Saracens accounts, 15 rugby accounts like this. So rugby is just sort of 25 years behind football, and we're sort of slowly catching up. But we really need to sort of accelerate that process. Aiden says, something that's worrying me is the quality drop in the Currie Cup. Not very competitive, not even before COVID. New Zealand domestic leagues, great. French and English also good. Currie Cup needs to pull up their socks. I think we started the Currie Cup off on a really good note. I think the first 3 or 4 weeks, we had a really good Currie Cup going, where we did a couple of high-scoring games, but they weren't like what we've seen in the last sort of 2 weeks, where it was just childish defending. We saw some really good rugby in the opening couple of weeks. And we then had that sort of hiatus during the Lions series where we had games cancelled, stuff like that. And since then, it's been a mess. The last 3 weeks have been atrocious. Tries for fun, everybody sort of applying sunscreen on each other, not making tackles. It really has not been a good watch. But it's frustrating because the first couple of weeks I thought were really good. Yeah, in terms of this weekend, we'll have our official preview out tomorrow. Argentina will be announcing their squad at 4 o'clock. We'll have the press conference up from there, so you can make sure. Don't worry, we'll sort you out there. Tomorrow morning we'll have Spoon Corsey's press conference coming out. If you haven't seen Alton Yankees one today, go and check it out. It's very, very interesting how he's progressed as a young man who came onto the scene at 21 years old, won a Currie Cup, got included in the box squad, then had a couple of bad years, and you can hear from his voice how much he reflects on the fact that he's had to mature so much, and he's become a very important player. I won't even say a player. He's become a very important personality in the Springbok squad in terms of the way he's helping it. And I think from the sounds of it, I reckon we could actually see him as a coach, because Jacques Nienaber has spoken at length about what he's doing behind the scenes in terms of preparation. He was very important in the World Cup. So it's good to sort of see that we created this environment in the Springboks where, players like Alton Yankees are very aware. He knows Andre Pollard is ahead of him. He knows he's not the number one choice. He knows that at this stage he won't become the number one choice. But we've got players who, and Carl Brits was a bit like that. They understand that that's their role. So what do? They've got 2 options. You can sulk and you can not be happy about it, or you can embrace the fact that you need to prepare the side, and you put your heart and soul into doing that. And we saw Kwaka Smith doing that. Thomas Atoy was doing that a lot during the World Cup, and it made all the difference. So it's really, really cool to see the team environment where it's not just a case of people being competitive for positions, but people understanding what their role is, even if they're not a player, that they're going to make sure they're going to hit hard, they're going to do everything they can during the week, so that when the Springboks go out and win on Saturday, you can sit in the stands and say, I helped that. I was a major reason for that happening. So it's a really good environment. It's a very healthy environment, but it's a really cool press conference. So go and check it out. Tomorrow we'll have Spoon Corsey out. As I said, the Argentina one will be out in the afternoon. Tomorrow we'll also be dropping a video on how you can watch the Rugby Championship potentially for free. Well, not entirely for free, but through ExpressVPN and a free broadcaster. So we'll give you those details tomorrow in a video where I'll explain exactly which broadcasters are showing it, how much they all are, what you have to pay, what you don't have to pay, what games they're showing, and stuff like that. And I'm going to try and do more of those videos. So when it comes to the Rugby Championship, I'll do a video on how you can watch that as well. Because a lot of people don't have DSTV, are trying to find ways online. At the end of the day, very few free networks show it. I never will recommend an illegal stream because, first of all, it gives your laptop all sorts of viruses. Second of all, it's a bit of a hypocritical of me to sort of say, go and... I think it's one thing if you're accessing a broadcaster which is showing it for free, where they paid the rights. But if there's too much piracy, these broadcast rights are what funds all our programs and stuff like that. So as much as I don't like what SuperSport does in terms of how much it is, SuperSport are incredibly important for South African sport. If SuperSport were to fall over tomorrow, South African sport would be in the mud. But I will be releasing a video showing you guys how, or explaining which of you guys can go watch it on official broadcasters. So you don't have to worry about piracy or anything like that. Aiden says, finally, I've been waiting for Los Pumas squad announcement. Blocker do it too early. I know, this whole Tuesday thing, it's ridiculous. I mean, I can only talk about the same squad for so many blooming years. Katana says, I've always been hoping to see Spoon Corsey at 13 with at 12 and U-Shark center combo. Well, I think they need a 12. I just don't know if I'd like to see at 12. I think he'd probably work. I think he's good enough to play anywhere, but... Yeah, but anyway, we're going to wrap up there. Please do support Manscaped. Really do. We've been given, a target that we need to try and hit this month. And if we do hit that, then they'll come on board for longer. So, yeah, please go and use the discount code forever, 20% off, free shipping. Go and check their store out. They've got everything you could ever possibly need. If you support them, they'll support us. We can give you cooler content. Maybe we can go over to France 2023 and show you what a World Cup is like. That's my dream. Let's try and make it a reality, shall we? Before I go, smash like on the video, subscribe to the channel. We're trying to push for 6,000 subscribers. I can't actually believe I'm saying that. We released our first rugby video less than a year ago, and I'm talking about 6,000 subscribers. So thank you so much. Smash like on the video. We probably won't be live tomorrow night, I don't think. We might be live on Friday night. If not, we'll be live on Saturday morning for both New Zealand versus Australia, and then the evening for South Africa versus Argentina. Keep well, keep safe, and I'll chat to you guys all very soon.